It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. And our conversation with J. Randy Taraborelli, the author of JFK-Public, Private, Secret, is presented by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Law Firm and Best Personal Injury Lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Now, you all know that I read a ton of books, and I'm usually reading 4 or 5 or 6 at any given time. This one was one of those few that when you pick it up, you can't read the other books that you have on your roster because you are so deeply into this one. JFK Public, Private, Secret. Randy, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful, and it's good to catch up with you once again. We've done 4 or 5 of these conversations on your Kennedy books. And this one, as I was telling you a few moments ago, I think is the best you've done. And you've got so much material and so much resources available to you. It goes back a quarter century, just the amount of material that you have, interviews that you've conducted with people who many of whom aren't even with us anymore.
Yeah, this was a really great project in that respect because I was able to go back over all of my interviews from so long ago, and listen to what they had to say about JFK, because this is the first time I've written about JFK. And, they were all interviewed for my different Jackie books. Mm-hmm. But of course they had their JFK memories as well, which weren't appropriate for the Jackie books, that are very appropriate for this book. And so I was able to draw from a lot of source material, and it was, a great project. And then, as I told you, I also conducted interviews with people specifically for this book, many of whom are in their 90s and in their hundreds today, who, wanted to tell their stories before it was too late.
Yeah.
And those stories are included as well. So it's a pretty comprehensive approach to JFK.
One of the aspects of the book that comes through is JFK was charismatic. He was very, very popular. He was one of those people who could light up a room and command attention as soon as you walked into it. But he was a very immature man right up until the end. And you could sense the frustration that people are in his immediate circle had with him, even as they just loved the guy to death.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because a quote that I did not use in the book, which I think is a really great summation, is Teddy White, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his book, The Making of the President, in 1960. And he was also the man who worked with Jackie to create the Camelot mythology after JFK was assassinated. Teddy White said, the people who loved him more than they should have, and the people who hated him didn't know him at all. In other words, what I think I got from that was that he was so charismatic that the people who loved him allowed him to get away with pretty much bad behavior for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I think that you read in the book the story of this man who was growing as not only a leader but as a man, during the last maybe 10 years of his life, and slowly becoming a person who was accountable not only to his wife but also to the country. And that accountability is I think, what we look for in our leaders. Toward the end of his life, when he told Joan Kennedy, the way that I treated Jackie is painful, he said, and by painful I mean shameful. That's a man who is taking accountability, and I love that story, and it's kind of a hopeful story to tell during these kind of fractured times that we're living in right now. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to tell it.
He was so protected by the people around him that for a lot of us down through the years, and it comes through in your book as well, the only things we know of him are through the eyes of other people. And Jackie certainly is one of those, and we'll talk about her in a second. But I wanted to talk about JFK and Jackie's mom, because that is sort of a picture of that relationship. Is the way that a lot of people around him, it's the way their lives evolved as well. Jackie's mom, Janet, and JFK, they sometimes were absolutely enemies, and at other times, especially toward the end, Janet seemed to recognize that in JFK she was dealing with a little boy becoming a man, even at his age.
Wow, I'm so happy to be able to talk about this with you because I don't get a lot of questions about that, and Janet Auchincloss is one of my favorite characters in the book, and her only son Jamie Auchincloss has been one of my best sources for 10, 15 years now. And you're right. I mean, when your son-in-law is the president of the United States, it's hard to be mad at him. But when he treats your daughter the way that JFK treated Jackie, it's easy to be mad at him. And she vacillated between those two extremes over the course of the 10 years that he was in her life. And they got to really appreciate and respect each other. I mean, at the beginning, she was so mad at him over something that occurred that she wouldn't even let him sleep in the house. Mm-hmm. He had to sleep in the servants' quarters over the garage. And then, 8 years later, he gives her the nickname Wellspring, from which all good things spring. And he admired her so much, and he apologized to her. He said, "I hope I'm really sorry for some of the things that I did." And she said, her quote was, "Families endure," and she was determined to find a way forward with her son-in-law. And she did. And, toward the end of his life, when Janet and Jackie were planning the ceremony to renew JFK and Jackie's wedding vows in 1964, had he not been assassinated, that was the plan. Janet turned to Jackie and said, "Wow, after everything that we've all been through, you really love him, don't you?" And Jackie said, "I do." And then she added, and this quote really knocked me out, she said, "Because it's we who made him." In other words, we are all sort of responsible for the good and the way that we bolstered him into the presidency, and for the bad in the way that we accepted his bad behavior because he was JFK, Yeah. And she's also taking accountability. She's not blaming him for their troubled marriage. She's saying, I'm just as responsible as he is for my part in the bad marriage. And I think that that's the only way that you ever get to forgiveness, is by taking accountability. She didn't blame JFK. She took accountability. And I love that story, and I think that, people can get a lot out of that. And it's those kinds of stories that make my book successful, because people can really relate to this. I mean, if you've ever had trouble in your relationship, and who hasn't, taking accountability for your part in it goes a long way toward forgiveness.
There is probably no relationship more complicated than Jack and Jackie Kennedy. And I told you a couple of moments ago that I think Jackie comes through even stronger in this book than the previous book, which was Jackie-Public Private Secret. In this new book, JFK-Public Private Secret, we watch a woman of incredible strength. I don't think there was a whole lot of love or even likability between the two of them when they got married. At the end, they were as close as a couple could be, and really it was because of her.
Well, I love that you felt that, because that's what I wanted to impart to the reader, because I think one of the reasons why we have a fuller picture of Jackie here is because we're actually looking at her through JFK's eyes for the first time. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing, that she, how supportive she was, but also how she would take him to task. And there's a point in the book, toward the end of the book, where she says, that's it. If you continue going down this road of infidelity, we're over. And she meant it. This is around 1962, 63. And people really don't know that, Jackie knew how to draw a line in the sand, and she knew exactly when to push and when to pull back. During the Bay of Pigs, as we talked about earlier, the disastrous Bay of Pigs in his first 100 days of office, when he was so distraught about the loss of life that occurred, under his watch, it was Jackie who said, "Look, you need to buck up. You need to. The JFK I know is not going to let this get him down. The JFK I know is going to, continue. And I love the fact that Jack Kennedy took accountability for the Bay of Pigs, even though it was something he inherited from the Eisenhower administration. But what I love even more is that Jackie didn't want him to, right? Like Jackie's position was, no, you don't take accountability for this until there's a full investigation, because Jackie thought the CIA was responsible. So she was, she was getting intelligence briefings early in their time in the White House. So Jackie was not what people thought. She knew exactly what was going on. She had strong opinions about it. He didn't always listen because he did take accountability, and it was the right decision for him to do that because his approval rating went up to 85% as a result of him taking accountability. So in that respect, she was wrong, but she definitely had an opinion, and people don't even think Jackie ever had opinions.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you what, we only have a few moments left with Randy Taraborelli. We really could turn this into a two-parter or a three-parter. And you do such a wonderful job of exploring the people around JFK, but really it is a JFK book, and we get inside his mind in a way that we never have before, including the work that he did in his quest from the very moment, it seems, that he took office, to get rid of the Vietnam problem, to deal with it in the way that he saw properly, to get the United States out of the Vietnam War, and at the same time keep control of a government that the people around him were not always trustworthy, did not do what he expected and anticipated that they would do. He had to put up with a lot of people who thought they knew better than him, and to watch him maneuver his way through these situations, sometimes not as successfully as he would want to, and to get inside his mind and read his thoughts at that time. It really is a tremendous job that you've done in letting us inside the mind and the administration of JFK.
Thank you. I appreciate that because, this is the problem with a lot of presidencies is, you often have people surrounding you, who have their own agenda. And when JFK came into office, a lot of the people there he inherited from the Eisenhower administration, and he thought they knew what they were doing, and it turns out they didn't. Or it turns out they wanted to do it a way that was completely different than what JFK wanted to do, and then they still did it their way. So it took him not a long time, but it took him about a year to figure this out. And in that year there was a lot of trial and error, like I said, the Bay of Pigs, for instance. But by the time he got to the Cuban Missile Crisis, he realized, and this is in 1963, that he could not listen to the people surrounding him, his cabinet. That he had to take what they said and then decide on his own what he thought was the best course of action. And in doing that, he got us out of a terrible situation that could have ended in a huge catastrophe, and I'm talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis that could have ended with, an atomic bomb being, shot right to our states. Mm-hmm. And there were 13 days there when people thought that was going to happen. And it was because JFK didn't listen to his cabinet that it didn't happen, because there were a lot of people surrounding JFK who wanted to accelerate this thing, and he wanted to pull back and be reasonable and figure out a way, and he did. And all that story is portrayed in great detail in the book, but it is to say that he was growing not only as a man, but as a president by the time he was assassinated.
Yeah. Randy Taraborelli, J. Randy Taraborelli. The book is JFK-Public, Private Secret, the growth that JFK showed at the end of his life. We wonder what the next 10 years would have been like. Would he have regressed? Would he have progressed? Well, it's something that we have news source material from, thanks to this book, so that we can continue to get to know this man, JFK. Randy, thanks so much for the visit this morning. It's been fun.
Thank you. I love talking to you. Thank you so much.